All right, let's dive right into today's explainer. We are looking at an absolute medical legal mystery today, the courtroom clash of Dr. Ben Brown. We're going to break down a terribly tragic case out of Florida's Panhandle, and I promise you an impartial, step-by-step breakdown of the high-stakes legal battle that is brewing right now.
Okay, let's dive into this. Picture this. It's November 21st, 2023, and a desperate 911 call comes in from a Florida plastic surgery clinic. A patient, Hillary Brown, is having severe seizures right in the middle of a procedure. The surgeon operating on her? Well, it's her own husband, Dr. Ben Brown. And you know, the initial reaction from law enforcement arriving on the scene was totally visceral. One responding deputy immediately noted how incredibly weird and concerning the whole setup felt. I mean, a doctor operating on his own wife who then codes on the table? That is just a massive, immediate red flag.
To really grasp the criminal charges here, we've got to walk through the exact timeline of how this routine procedure escalated into a fatal emergency. So, at minute 0, Dr. Brown finishes a scar revision. Hillary is reportedly awake, literally prepping her own IV bags. But fast forward 30 minutes, Dr. Brown starts injecting a numbing medication around her eyes, and suddenly her vision blurs. Within just 5 minutes of that, she starts suffering multiple severe seizures. We're talking 3 to 4 minutes each. But here is the most crucial, heartbreaking data point. There was a devastating 10 to 15-minute delay before anyone actually called 911. Tragically, Hillary passed away in the hospital exactly 7 days later.
And this brilliantly illustrates the shocking specific allegations of clinic negligence that investigators uncovered. These details right here form the absolute core of the arrest warrant. Clinic staff claimed Hillary had taken a quote-unquote plethora of unknown pills beforehand. They confirmed she was prepping her own IVs. And it gets wilder. Staff alleged Dr. Brown poured undiluted xylazine straight into a bowl for injections. The warrant states that even as Hillary's face swelled up and she complained of blurred vision, Dr. Brown just kept going. He allegedly ignored the glaring signs of an overdose and of course delayed that utterly crucial 911 call.
So what does this all mean legally? Well, these staggering allegations led the state to charge Dr. Brown with manslaughter by culpable negligence. Now, to be clear, this isn't about premeditated murder. The state absolutely does not have to prove intent here. Instead, prosecutors have to prove that his overall conduct as a medical professional crossed a major line, that it was so exceptionally reckless and profoundly negligent that it directly caused her death.
But Dr. Brown has pleaded not guilty, and his defense attorney, the well-known Mark O'Mara, is pushing back hard. And I mean really hard. The defense strategy isn't just about arguing that the clinic was a bit chaotic. No, it's a highly calculated surgical strike against the state's most important piece of evidence. They are attempting to completely block the official cause of death from ever seeing a courtroom. To pull this off, the defense requested something called a Daubert hearing. If you're not familiar, think of this as a legal gatekeeper. It's a pre-trial hearing where a judge basically looks at an expert witness's science and decides, hey, is this actually valid enough to show a jury? The defense is using this exact tool to challenge the state's medical examiner, arguing that her entire methodology is fundamentally flawed. Now, why go after the medical examiner, Dr. Deanna Oleski? Well, the defense's motion spells it out plainly, claiming she has no training or expertise in the area of toxicology. See, the examiner ruled that Hillary died from lidocaine toxicity, essentially an overdose of that numbing agent. But the defense is exposing a massive vulnerability for the state here. They're asking if she literally isn't a toxicologist, how can she legally testify about toxic drug levels to a jury? So the crucial point is how this process usually works. Normally, a medical examiner performs the autopsy, collects the samples, and then farms them out to a highly trained specialized toxicologist. Then you wait. After weeks of peer-reviewed analysis, that toxicologist sends a report back, and the medical examiner finalizes the cause of death based on that specialist data. That is standard practice. But here is where this specific case gets incredibly complicated. Remember that timeline we talked about? Hillary Brown didn't pass away on the operating table. She survived for 7 days on life support in the hospital, and during that week, her body naturally processed and absorbed whatever drugs were in her system. So standard post-mortem toxicology testing, where you take blood from a deceased body to see exactly what they overdosed on, it became almost impossible. The toxic levels just weren't present in the same way anymore.
Now, what's really interesting to compare here is the head-to-head scientific clash heading into this trial. On one side, you have the state's medical examiner. Because of that 7-day delay, she used a rule-out method, basically eliminating all other causes to conclude, okay, it must have been lidocaine toxicity. But on the exact opposite side, the defense brought in their own expert, an actual toxicologist. He examined the hospital admission records and firmly concluded that her lidocaine levels were absolutely not toxic.
And this leads us to a seriously controversial admission. The defense discovered that their toxicologist actually sent his scientific findings over to the medical examiner before she even finalized her report. And in a deposition, the medical examiner admitted she was familiar with the toxicologist's letter, but, and get this, she did not make much of it. For the defense, this is absolute gold. They're fiercely arguing that she used a guessing game method while actively, knowingly ignoring hard data from a specialized expert.
Now, as if this criminal case wasn't complex enough, there was a completely separate, parallel investigation happening at the exact same time. The Florida Department of Health was conducting their own massive review just to determine if Dr. Brown should even be allowed to keep practicing medicine. Talk about a massive hurdle for the prosecutors.
The medical board actually came down pretty hard, suspending Dr. Brown's medical license for 1 full year. After looking at the clinic conditions and the timeline of that day, they determined he was indeed severely negligent. And the biggest reason? That absolutely critical failure to call 911 immediately. Let's move to and see how this builds into an absolute bombshell. Because while the board suspended him for negligence, look at what they actually wrote in their official findings. The Department of Health stated that the defense's toxicologist credibly concluded that lidocaine was not the cause of Hillary's death. You heard that right. The state's very own medical board entirely rejected the state medical examiner's core theory. So where in the world does this leave the prosecution? Honestly, the state essentially has 2 paths forward right now. Path 1, they somehow survive this Daubert hearing, force the medical examiner's testimony through to trial, and convince a jury of the lidocaine theory, completely despite the medical board's total disagreement. Path 2, though, far riskier. They'd have to argue that the exact toxin doesn't even matter. They would rely entirely on proving that Dr. Brown's overall conduct and that brutal 15-minute 911 delay was so horrific that it constitutes manslaughter, regardless of the chemical involved.
Which brings us to our final, highly provocative question. Because, this case really isn't just about one tragic day anymore. It's a massive stress test of how our justice system handles medical accountability when the foundational science is so heavily contested. If the judge actually throws out the official cause of death, can the state still win a manslaughter conviction, purely on a surgeon's horrific negligence during an emergency? It is an incredible legal tightrope, and we'll certainly be watching closely. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive, and I'll catch you next time in our next Explain.